Don't miss the latest installment of the Gathering Storm series as we take a look at the tips and tactics for the new Eldari rules.
Spiking bits.
Alright, welcome back, Hobby Maniacs. Rob Baer with you again today, taking a look at the brand new supplement for the Eldari, and containing the Ynnari faction. I don't know how else I can rhyme this, but it's crazy out there. Like, there's so much stuff going on, so much background material. Basically, it's a side story that happened to all the events in Gathering Storm 1, and then it all comes together at the very end of this book in a pretty exciting parallel type conclusion slash cliffhanger that, of course, will continue along with Gathering Storm Part 3. But as far as rules go, we've already taken a look at the book and given you our thoughts on, whether it's worth your hobby dollars, which obviously I think it is if you're into Eldar or Dark Eldar or even Harlequins. This really gives you a lot of new rules here to bring things together and kind of play them in a different way that wasn't readily possible, I guess, before. Now, normally when we do these first looks, we kind of take a look at the rules in the back of the book, like the special warlord traits, the special rules for the armies, and then of course we get into the psychic powers, if any, etc., etc. And this will be no different, but just keep in mind that there are some Echoes of War missions at the front of the book, and the only thing really rules-wise you need to know about them is that they do use the Empirical Storms cards that came in the first book, Gathering Storm 1, The Fall of Cadia. So if you still have those and you still want to play some of that, well, just be aware that you could use those cards in here, which I thought was pretty neat. And then it gets into the data sheet section, and we're just going to fast forward all the way to the back to the special rules section, the Forces of Ynnari, which is going to be the stage for our tips and tactics review. Now, a couple of caveats. This isn't an all-encompassing, like, if you take this and you put this in this list, then this list becomes invincible. This is a kind of a, hey, look at this. Look at how these powers kind of interact and give you some broad-reaching kind of ideas and metas and things. We're not a competitive channel here. We're basically a review and a hobby channel, mostly media. There's other sites out there that do that stuff. Like, if you want the greatest way to kill your opponent in 3 turns, to me, that isn't even what this hobby is about. So I'm gonna tell you if I think something's a little crazy and you need to be on the lookout for it, but I'm not gonna tell you, hey, do this and do that and give your opponent a feel badsies. You might as well just give him a Snickers bar while he waits around and you whoop his ass. That's not what we're about here, and that, in my opinion, is not what 40k is about. And if you're playing that way, well, you might want to take a look at some other parts of your life, I suppose. I don't know. We all want to be part of something, but at the end of the day, it's not nice to waste somebody's 4 hours of their life on the other side of the table, which, depending on who you ask, seems to be kind of how it's going around these days, unfortunately. But it is a very exciting time for the hobby, so I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. But there is a lot of potentials for abuse out there when you're talking, 20, 25 supplements and codexes as well out there. It basically comes down to who knows what first, and maybe getting one over on somebody a little bit. And we're not going to get into that. This is a tips and tactics review of the new Gathering Storm 2 book with the Ynnari. Now, there's a lot of content in here allowing you to play the Eldar, the Dark Eldar, and even the crazy clown Eldar, the Harlequins, together in different ways, which I thought was really cool. But there's also a kind of a sneaky little alt-way kind of detachment in here too, featuring Black Guardians and the OG Webway Assault from the Eye of Terror supplement campaign. Not retcon, not part of canon. I don't know what's going on, but apparently it never happened. But still, it happened because these rules are basically based off of those rules from that book way back in the day, which I guess only us veterans remember now, unfortunately. But for you new folks, well, that's where it came from. So first up, we have the new rules, the Forces of the Ynnari. There's army-wide special rules, which are the Strength from Death, and then each of the data sheets in the front for the special characters also have some individual rules. They can actually be taken in any of the Eldari books, that being Harlequins, Eldar, and then also Dark Eldar as well, without any regard to factions. You can literally just take the HQ, Yvraine or whatever, and just put her in the Eldar list, or just put her in, you know, a Dark Eldar list if you want. That is legal according to the rules. But that being said, there's other ways that the Ynnari factionalize out, and you need to be very aware of this, because if you don't read this section and you just read these formations here, and even the big detachment, the Reborn detachment, Warhost, you might miss this little tidbit here. And what basically this does is, if you field this detachment, which is your super detachment, your kind of time of ending detachment, or any of these three formations here, Yanid's Net, Whispering Ghost Host, Soul Bond of Vanguard, or the Eldari Blade Host, or even the Triumvirate of Yanid itself, and of course all of these are already Ynnari faction, then everything in it becomes Ynnari faction. And they lose certain special rules. They lose their Ancient Doom, which is the anti-Slaanesh leadership thing that nobody ever remembers anyways, in my opinion, and we all forget about, so let's just keep forgetting about it. The Battle Focus special rule, the Power for Pain for Dark Eldar, special rules in and of themselves. But they gain the Strength from Death special rule, which is really dope, and that unlocks the ability, if you're a Warlord, to take Warlord Traits table, and also taking the artifacts of Ynnari themselves over here. So there's some benefits, there's some drawbacks, and then there's a whole bunch of combos all over the place, all day, every day. And we're going to get to all those too, as best we can. So first off, we have the artifacts of Ynnari, which are on the opposite page here. There's always 6, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, whatever. But they're worth talking about. Then we've got the Strength from Death special rule, which is definitely worth talking about because it is crazy nuts. So anytime a unit is completely destroyed within 7 inches of a non-vehicle unit that consists of only models with this special rule, which if you're doing it right, you'll always kind of pop this off. Pick one of those units to make a soul burst action. You cannot pick a unit that's locked in combat, so you can't kind of Age of Sigmar and get multiple attacks and things like that. Falling backer has gone to ground. A unit making soul burst action can only do one of the following, even if it has already done so this turn. However, a unit cannot make a soul burst action more than once per turn. Now, there are ways to trigger multiple soul burst actions at the same time, but there is not a way to do double on the same squad, so keep that in mind. So this, if you start thinking about it, you're like, well, okay, that's cool, and there's some neat abilities here. It really starts to kind of work into the meta, where Games Workshop's doing this weird thing where they come out with a set of rules and people get all bonkers, and then they come out with a soft counter or a hard counter to it. Like, for instance, Gene Stealer Cult came out, right? And everybody's like, oh my god, they're gonna jump up on me and they're gonna be so close and blah 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 blah. And then they came out with Wrath of Magnus, where you could get the little horrors and they could split and split and split, and you could basically successfully bubble wrap all of your big nasty flying monstrous creatures that had to start on the table. Or they came out with Greyfax, right, for the Imperium, where she basically negates a lot of the strengths of the Gene Stealer Cult. So it's like they came out with this rule set, they came out with some counters to it, right? So now we have another issue on the table. Demons got a lot better, and of course the split mechanic with the horrors is kind of bananas and a little bit out of control. We saw a huge resurgence in that happening. Magnus took down a major GT here in the south, and then of course Fate Weaver with a bunch of horrors with split mechanic with the Purge from Renegade, Siege of Vrax special rules also abused crap out of LVO. And nothing against the guy that played, he did a great job, but he was reliant heavily on the mechanics of just the inherent, it's almost like the inherent brokenness of the mechanics. Like, Eldar are accidentally good. Like, you take the split mechanic, you put a monstrous creature inside of it, it's basically untouchable. He can fly around and do crazy things. Once he gets up in the air, he can get on station. Maybe if you have Admech, you can shoot him down, maybe not, whatever. But there's ways that rules are becoming accidentally good, but Games Workshop seems to have a built-in counter to them as well. So, that being said, it's really interesting that there almost seems to be a method to their madness. And this, Strength from Death, almost seems to be a counter to the split mechanic. If you think about it, now you can only, again, do a soul burst action once per turn, but the ability to do multiples of these and trigger other things and get actions after you kill something, and of course the split mechanic, you're going to be able to kill and you're going to get more units, you're going to be able to kill those if you have units to successfully activate. It's really interesting. So keep this in mind. You can do this at your turn or their turn, the way it reads, like whenever a unit is completely destroyed. So if you're in the assault phase and you destroy something, you can do one of these, right? Or if you're in their assault phase, your opponents, and you kill something, you can do one of these. It's crazy. Like, this is completely out of sequence kind of turn stuff happening. So here's what you can do. A unit can immediately move as if you're where you're moving phase. A unit can immediately shoot or run or turbo boost as if it were your shooting phase. Or a unit can immediately make a charge moves as if it were your charge sub phase. The enemy gets a chance to fire Overwatch. A unit that makes a charge into fight subphase does so at the end of the current initiative step, blah, 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 blah. So it kind of makes sense. So you finish up your combat at initiative and then you get run up on by another squad and initiate laser dodging and all sorts of stuff there. So really interesting stuff. This is huge. Now, it only happens within 7. And that's a very important mechanic, or I guess a thing to keep in mind too as we read through some of these rules. And then of course you can have the Revenant Psychic Ability chart that unlocks, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Then we've got the artifacts. Well, let's talk about the Warlord traits first of all. So you got the generic. Your Warlord has the it will not die. Okay, cool, whatever, fine. That's a decent one. The second one is Amaze Balls. If you get this, your Warlord basically, if he's a Psyker, gets to choose his psychic powers. What? Okay. Nailed it. How do I get that all the time? That's amazing. 3 is at the top of the turn, you get to choose Fierce Charge, Hit and Run, or Move Through Cover special rule if you want it. Pretty cool, very versatile. I like it. Master of Death is you get to do, and on any wounds of 6, your attacks become instant death. Okay, I can get behind that. That's pretty neat. Situational, but alright. 5 is your Warlord and all friendly units with the Ynnari faction within 7 of them are fearless. There's other ways to get that, but that's cool. And favor that you need, your Warlord and their unit can make a Soul Burst action when they're within 14 of a unit that is destroyed rather than 7. So very important distinction. 14 instead of 7 gives you a bigger reach. You'll see why that's important at some point later in this review. Then on to the artifacts. Again, some good ones, some bad ones. The first one is if you kill a model within a certain range. Oh no, just if you just kill a model, you on a 4-up, you regain a lost wound, which is kind of cool if you're not one of the triumvirate. That's a cool little mechanic that you can get to regain some of your lost wounds. Then we've got a blade here, the strength of user. It's Fleshbane. If it's an Eldari model, according to page 1114, it's killed by this weapon. Before any casualties are removed, the wielder regains any lost wounds that it might have had. So Eldari counts, and they're very specific, and we'll see that. It's Harlequins, regular Codex Eldar, Craftword Eldar, and also Dark Eldar. So those are your 3 options for Ynnari. So stop the elf on elf crime, but if you can't, at least get your wounds back. The Lost Shroud, the Baer gets Eternal Warrior, feel no pain, and it will not die, but it loses an independent character special rule. Kind of interesting. Mirror Gaze, the wielder has blind, counterattack, and night fight special rule. Song of You Need is a ranged weapon that's strength 1, AP 5, Blade Storm, Death Song, Poison 2-up. So it's going to get through, it's going to wound stuff on a 2-up. A roll of 6 automatically is AP 2. And any model killed by this weapon in a shooting phase, it must take a morale check at the end of the phase. Okay, so that's one of the lesser good ones. Soul Snare, 25-point weapon. The strength range 8 inches, strength 3, AP 2, assault 1, blast, instant death, 1 use only. Situational at strength 3, but will do the Lord's work against stuff that is super low toughness, or if you can knock down some toughness with some shenanigans, this would be pretty neat. But it's 25 points. I don't think it's even worth taking. Then we jump into the Reborn War Host detachment. This is very similar to the Castellans formation or detachment from the first Gathering Storm book. Now, this I talked about in the first look review, and this is really, to me, feels a lot like the End Times for Fantasy. The way they did all these super alliance kind of type deals. This is your Eldari alliance, and we're going to see what that means here in the future of this review. But know this, you get lots of choices over here from all 3 of the Eldari books. That being Eldar, Dark Eldar, and Harlequins. Now, it's set up very similar to a normal force organization chart. Your compulsory is 1 HQ and 2 troops. However, you can field the normal amount of every other thing. So you can field 3 elites, 3 fast attacks, 3 heavies, up to 6 troops, 0 to 1 Lord of War, and 2 HQs. If you do take this, it is a special type of detachment. So if you put these formations in this detachment, which you can do, so you can have one formation, or excuse me, you can have one of the following formations in your detachment, you gain these rules as well. So their rules work inside of the detachment rules, which is kind of neat and really cool to see. You have all the other standard force organization options as well right there. Now, there is some command benefits. Let's see. So you got Leader of the Reborn. If this detachment is chosen as your primary, you can reroll the result on the Ynnari Warlord traits table that we already talked about. Our Souls in Trust. This one basically says that any other units from this detachment within 7 inches of the same unit do not have to make a morale check when they lose more than 25% of their models. And if this detachment includes 7 or more units, based off this right here, you can select 1 additional unit to make a soul burst action each time a unit is destroyed. So that's one way to trigger a soul burst action, or multiples, but remember the same one can't do 1 twice, so you can trigger 2 if you're within range, etc., which could be 14, could be 7. There's lots of ways to layer and combo this stuff and get up multiple actions, which they kind of need. And then you're going to start seeing increasing complexities too once we get to the psychic phase. Was that all of the... Wanted to make sure that, yes, that was all of the big points. Checking my notes here. Basically, I have to spend a good couple of hours with the book, kind of cracking it all down, boiling it down, getting, cracking out on it in the beat slab, and just really kind of trying to digest it and understand where it is. And a lot of times, we may misspeak, but that's what comments are for, obviously. So if we say something wrong or you have something to add to it, just hit us up in the comments, because this benefits everybody here. And a lot of times, we're doing these reviews before the internet really gets a hold of and starts talking about this at release weekend, because we're trying to crank these out as quick as we can to stay on our content release schedule here. And this is the Revenant Discipline, the psychic power chart that anybody with the Ynnari faction is allowed to take. Now, something to keep in mind here too that may not be 100% apparent as of yet, but when you take this Warhost detachment, if you say you take a Farseer from the Eldar Craft Worlds Codex, he is technically Ynnari, so now he unlocks these. And then if you take an Autarch, he is now a Ynnari faction, so he unlocks being able to take the War Gear. So it's very important to make that distinction. Remember, they lose battle focus, they get the Soul Burst, all that stuff. There's layers upon layers. This is the Onion, the Codex of the Onion. There's a lot of layers in here to try to digest, and I'm sure at least some point here I'm going to misspeak if I haven't already. So then we get to the disciplines. You have a Primaris power, which is okay. It's a focus Witchfire. If the Psyker has a higher leadership, then the target unit suffers a strength 6. If it's lower, it's strength 3. And they don't get any cover saves or normal saves allowed against it. Obviously, invulnerable saves still work. Shield that you need is a Blessing. While this power is in effect, all friendly units within 7 inches of the Psyker have a 6-up invulnerable. That's pretty much the only invulnerable mechanic outside of normal War Gear and this psychic power. Granted, you can get other psychic powers to give you +1 to all your saves. Obviously, some of the Psykers have access to Santic, which gives you benefits there to your cover saves too, or to all saves actually. But that's just something to keep in mind. So there would be a way you could combo it and maybe get a 5-up invulnerable generally on your troops within 7 inches of the Psyker that casts this. And also, there's just ways to do it, is what I'm trying to say. Be aware of it. I don't think it's incredibly powerful or competitive, but there is ways to do it. Storm of Whispers, Warp Charge 1, Nova. I like this one. Strength 3, AP 2, Assault D6, Pinning, Ignores Cover. Fantastic. I love this. If you can also take Santic and you have access to some of those, well, we all know there's a really good Nova power in there as well that is very similar, but this one doesn't quite pop armor like the other one can. So just kind of keep some of the stuff in mind. Word of the Phoenix, it's a psychic power that targets a friendly unit with the Strength from Death special rule within 24 inches. They immediately get to make a Soul Burst action. So you have to have the ability to perform a Soul Burst action. You have to be within 24, and now you can immediately make a Soul Burst action. You cannot do 2, you can only do 1 per turn. Keep that in mind. But The abuse here is that now you can trigger Soul Burst, maybe kill something in the psychic phase, maybe trigger something else dying, something else getting a Soul Burst within 7 to 14 inches, and you can start a chain now inside of the psychic phase itself, which normally you would only have the ability to do psychic shooting to trigger that. You can't really assault in the psychic phase. So now that you could technically initiate a charge during the psychic phase with the Soul Burst ability with this power. That's probably why it's Warp Charge 2. So now you have the ability to really fire up this chain of events that could combo a lot of crazy out of sequence stuff. It's nuts. Like, there's so much going on. You almost need like a piece of paper, like you're playing a Magic, just to write down like all your stuff and what turn and what phase you're in. And it's just crazy. Like, I don't know if the game theoretically needs all this stuff, but, you know, in the hands of experienced players or just people getting together on the weekend, I think it's great. But it's very hard to start fitting all this stuff into 2.5 hour, 3 hour games and competitive events. Believe me, this is bananas, especially when there's a format out there that you don't get out of turn 4 generally, which I have a lot of strongly worded things to say about, but this now is not the time or the place for it. I don't think that is not what we want to get into tangent-wise here. Ancestor's Grace, Warp Charge 2 is a blessing that targets a non-friendly vehicle unit within 14. While it's in effect, it has 1 to weapon skill, ballistic skill, initiative, attacks, and leadership characteristic, and they gain adamantite will special rule. I would love to see a way to get strength, which you can. There's some furious charge mechanics in here, but it's okay. It's just okay. Like, I don't see the benefit here apparently right off the bat, but I'm sure there is something, or else it wouldn't be Warp Charge 2. Unbound Souls is a Witchfire, strength 4, assault, and it makes the number of shots equal to the number of models in the enemy unit, which is kind of ridiculous. Soul Reap, any models in the target unit is slain. One friendly unit with a strength from death special rule within 7 inches can now make a Soul Burst action. If any models in the target unit are slain, one friendly unit with a strength within 7 inches of the target unit may make a Soul Burst action. I feel like you would get to make that anyways if you had the Soul Burst. One friendly unit with a strength from death special rule within. I don't know. I feel like if you're within 7 and you can make the Soul Burst already, you could already do that. Am I missing something here? I feel like I'm missing something here, but I feel like that's how that works anyways. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm confused by that statement. Gaze That You Need is a really cool Witchfire that's 12-inch range, strength 10, AP 1, ignores cover, inescapable, which just means that you can't take invulnerable saves against it. It's pretty crazy. And then the Ynnari Tactical Objectives, which didn't come in card form this time, but there they are right there if you want to add them to your Maelstrom lineup when you're rolling the dice. Then we get into the Forces of Ulthwé, another really interesting kind of like surprise, hey, here we go, but they're in here. You can take them one of two ways. It's very important that you read how to do this right here. The units in this detachment, or in the Ulthwé Strike Force, can only be taken by fielding an Ulthwé Strike Force detachment right here, or as part of the Reborn Warhost, which we showed you. That's that big End of Days one right here. They are actually included in this. So that's the two ways to get them. If you include them in here, they become Ynnari faction, which unlock a lot of other things. We've talked about that. So there you go. And they get the Soul Burst ability. So imagine coming out of a webway portal within 9 inches, and suddenly the ability to trigger Soul Burst actions within 14 becomes really important, because if you're only coming in within 9 and you have the ability to perhaps kill something and trigger a Soul Burst chain, that would be pretty neat. So I could see where you want the 14-inch range. So you could put your Warlord in here, possibly, if they had that Warlord trait, and trigger something like that. Not a reliable mechanic, but it's something to think about. They also come with the standard crux of rules here: Ancient Doom, Battle Focus, we've seen that before, heavy weapon platforms. The only thing new here is Webway Assault. Units completely composed entirely of models with a special rule can be set up in Deep Strike Reserve instead of deploying with the rest of your army. They arrive from Deep Strike Reserves, they will not scatter, and no models in this unit can be placed within 9 inches. Okay, if you take them as part of the Ulthwé Strike Force, which you kind of have to, or you can take them the other way, but if you take them this way, you can only include the units that are in here, and they have this really cool benefit. All units in this attachment have stubborn and preferred enemy against Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Demons, Khorne Demonkin, and Renegade Knights. And if it contains at least 4 units, which would be the max, all units can roll to arrive from Deep Strike Reserve on turn 1. So you can start rolling on turn 1 and they don't scatter. they have to be with, outside of 9. Pretty cool. A little bit of Age of Sigmar mechanic there. I like it. I like what they're doing here with it. Now, let's take a look at the formations here, because I compared them to the ones in the normal Craft World book. And a couple of different things here. Black Guardians are about 20 points more. You don't get the ability to take the Warlock like you would in the other one. However, they kind of split the difference, and they give you the Storm Guardian Squad ability to take the Fusions and the Flamers. You can also take up to 2 Power Swords. They do have the Webway Assault, which is really cool. We talked about that. So, hello, we're here, and blah, blah, blah. But again, at the end of the day, they're squishy Eldar, Strength 3, Toughness 3, so they could fold up in a gentle breeze if you leave them on guard. 20 points more than the normal Guardian Defender squads. Black Guardian Wind Riders are 9 points more, basically 3 points a jet bike, and all they come with extra is the Webway Assault mechanic as well. You can take them in Scat configuration or Shuriken Cannon configuration, whichever you want to do there. Kinda cool. Viper Squadron, 45 points, 5 points more than the normal ones out of the Craft World book, and they have Webway Assault. And then you got your Black Guardian Warwalkers, which are 5 points more than the ones in the normal book, and pretty much the same as far as I can see there. Remember, these guys do have Fleet, they do have Scout, they do have the Webway Assault now, but maybe more importantly, a lot of people forget, they are Strength 5, they have 2 attack space, 3 on the charge. I cannot tell you how many times I brought these guys in outflanking and start kicking people with them, and they're like, holy crap, they're strength 5 and they got 3 attacks. Ah! And you just like roll up somebody's like squishy flank with Warwalker, just kicking them. It's hilarious. Doesn't happen very often, but I take particular glee when I did manage to pull that one off. And then the Armor of Ulthwé, which just kind of summarizes a lot of the war gear and the vehicle equipment that is in the normal Craft World Eldar Codex. Now, let's jump to the front of the book, because we've pretty much talked about all the juicy stuff there that we need to. Now let's talk about the forces of Eldari and how that all works, and the data sheets and the last couple of formations. Ooh, right on time. We're good. We're doing good on time, which is good. I didn't lollygag there too much. I tend to get off topic sometimes, which is unfortunate, but you know, being in the hobby as long as I have, I'm very opinionated. But we try to keep it positive for the hobby's sake, obviously. So everything in here, these next data sheets are the Ynnari faction, which it says here, but then remember there's a special rule in the back about how all that works. Here is what Ynnari faction means: your battle brothers, your allies, the convenience, your desperate, you come the apocalypse. Then it explains more about all that stuff, what the Eldari faction is themselves, okay? They are basically Eldar, Dark Eldar, Harlequins, or Ynnari themselves. So technically there's 4. Makes up the Eldari faction, I guess. So a little interchangeable. They say, hey, if you say Eldar, you can say Eldari, which we kind of pretty much already figured out. This is the icon of the Ynnari faction, which you can see right here over top of the data sheets, just like normal data sheets as well. Formations and detachments, just talking about how to field all that stuff in the back of the book, etc., etc. So there's your big stuff, and then we get into the rules themselves, which you got your Vrain, the Vizarch, and the Incarnate right here. Now, your Vrain, these are very squishy. I think if you're gonna field these, you're gonna need to field them in squads or together with something else that's big, because there's a neat trick you can do where you can look out Sir wounds off them, and then you have the abilities here, the Herald ability and the Champion ability. If a model is slain within 7 inches on a 4-up, you regain a lost wound for both of these. This one over here, not only do you regain a lost wound, but you can gain an attack as well. Same here. If you can gain a mastery level, and then you roll for a new psychic power, which is really cool. She only knows Demonology Santic, which is a great, very supportive discipline to know, and the Revenant discipline. So we talked about that a little bit. Where's my rule book? I lost it. Here it is. I want to talk about Santic real quick, because Santic is very interesting. Of course, the Grey Knights use it. It's got some stuff that's really cool. Hammer Hands, of course, is great because it gives you +1 strength. Sanctuary is amazing because it gives you +1 to your save. So it gives you +1 to your vulnerables, +1 to your normals, etc. etc. Cleansing Flame, that amazing Nova I touched on earlier. Assault 2d6 ignores cover. Soul Blast, it is strength 5, so it's a little bit better at punching rear armors than the one in the Psychic Powers there, but it is what it is. And then you got Vortex of Doom, Purge Soul, Gate of Infinity lets you bounce around, which is kind of cool, but they have their own way to bounce around in here. And then Banishment, effing with Demons. So there's some good and there's some bad, but it's a very supportive kind of type discipline for them to know. Now, squishy Eldar stats, high weapon skill, high ballistic skill, initiative 8, beat stick in combat. They all have their swords, you know, +1 strength, AP3 for Yvraine, Sword of Sorrows. The Vizark has the +2 at AP2, but it's two-handed, so you're not getting that extra attack. But at strength 5, it's way better than just your base strength 4 one over here. It's good that they added the strength here because kind of squishy, like I said. Weapon skill 7, ballistic skill. Remember, she doubled as a gladiator in the Pits of Kamara, so she's no slouch when it comes to fighting. But she does have her bodyguard, the Vizark, or the bodyguard if you need in general, who is squishy Eldar, a little bit slower than her, but higher save. She only has a 6 up. Now there's ways to adjust the saves like we already talked about. There's ways to get invulnerables like we already talked about. She does have a 4 up. If you get a Sanctuary off, that becomes a 3 up, right? So not too bad. Warlord trait, that's the favorite that you need. And if you remember correctly, that's the one that increases your range. So she might be good to put in a Webblade portal and jump out and, you know, do some stuff with the Ultway. Maybe not, who knows? But it's an option. Just keep that in mind there. She has Fleet, she's a Psyker, Strength from Death. She can do those soul burst chains, possibly, if you get them off and you're in range, which you should be because, well, she activates them at 14. Not sure about the points. Maybe there's something here that GW knows that we don't. Oh, and her little kitty cat gives her a extra D3 warp charge points, and only she can use those warp charge points herself. Because let's face it, cats are always plotting against everyone out there. There's no way they're going to help somebody else. The Vizark is 150. Stats are a little bit lower, like we said, combat-wise, but he does have Eternal Warrior. He does have Precision Strike, which they just don't give out very often, so that's a very important thing to remember. Rampage shouldn't be happening very often. It only triggers when there's more enemies than friendly models, which if that happens and he's being a bodyguard, and he really shouldn't have that happen to him, I don't think. If you're there, something that may have gone wrong. Strength from Death, Soul Burst, and Stubborn as well. Remember what we said about getting extra attacks and also healing wounds here. Now, he is the Warden, so he automatically can take her wounds. And remember, if he loses a wound, she could regain a wound on a 4-up. He is not a Psyker, so she wouldn't get anything like that. So that is an unfortunate little thing that won't combo off. But remember, she can throw wounds to things that just die straight up. You know what I mean? And then she would be able to regain them if she was down on her wounds right there. Same with the Vizark, can do the same exact thing and regain them as well if he lookout stirs them to something that just straight up dies. Always has the Warlord traits generated from the Inari Warlord trait table. Even if he's not his Warlord, you still get the ability to use it, considered to be your Warlord for the purposes of the Warlord trait itself, and has a super secret sword that we just talked about. Also lowers the lowest leadership in the unit rather than, they have to use the lowest leadership rather than the highest. 150 points, something to keep in mind. I feel like these two shouldn't be sold separately, but maybe they will be, you know, as far as on the tabletop, put them in a big squad or something and just kind of let them do their thing. Then we got the Incarnate, which is not a monstrous creature. It's a crazy avatar demon kind of, it is a monstrous creature, excuse me. It is a monstrous creature. It's not a gargantuan creature, so it's not stomping, but it's still pretty badass in and of itself. Pretty decent stat line here, strength 6, toughness 6, hits good, both combat and shooting, initiative 10, 5 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10, 3-up save, deep strike, eternal warrior, fleet, preferred enemy, demons of slash, psyker, mastery level 3, strength from death. Whew, that's a lot of stuff right there. Now, he is a psyker, so that's kind of something to keep in mind. He has a special avatar rule. Whenever an Eldari model within 7 is killed on a 3-up, he regains a wound. He also has his fantastic sword, his or her Sword of Souls. Strength to user, 6 at the current time. AP2, Fleshbane, Armorbane, and Soulbase. So not too bad. Billy Badass, 275. slightly less points than a Knight Titan. But here's where it gets good. Inevitable death. Whenever something dies, you basically get to pull this guy out of Deep Strike Reserve and put it next to it. Or if you're over here on this side of the table and something dies, you get to come over here and poof, here I am. You can't charge the next turn, but you can be there. Same, you know, or if you're over here, or you can do it again. Like whenever it happens, you can pop this thing off. It's crazy. Can't charge, only restriction, but you can pull them out of combat, so you can leave them up in the sky, and then all of a sudden something dies, turn 1, turn 2, whatever, boop, right, in play, ready to go. Situational, but something to be aware of. All non-friendly units with the Ynnari faction within 12 of the Incarnate have Fearless and Feel No Pain special rules. Very cool. Fearless is good, and so is Feel No Pain. So 12-inch bubble right there. Now, we get into the formations themselves, which it does indicate, which we already talked about, that they become Ynnari faction if you take things in these formations in here. So first off, you got the Triumvirate. Boom, boom, boom. It's the 3 that come in the box, of course, and then you've got the special rule Heralds of Rebirth, where if any friendly non-vehicle units from the Ynnari formation or detachment are within 12 of 2 of the models, they have the Fearless special rule. But wait, there's more. While all 3 models from this formation on the battlefield, all friendly units within the Ynnari faction have the Fearless special rule. So 2 different ways of saying 2 different things that mean 2 different things, but they're all in one special rule. So if you have all 3, everything's Fearless if they're Ynnari. Kind of cool. If all 3 models from this formation are on the battlefield, you can add 1 to any rolls made for the Avatar rule, the Champion rule, or the Herald rule. And you're like, well, what is that? Well, that's the one where you get your wounds back. So now, the Incarnate's getting his wounds back on a 3-up. The Vizark and the Yvrain are getting them back on a 3-up as well. That's pretty crazy if you start thinking about it. Oh, excuse me, a 2-up for the Avatar. So now all of a sudden, if something dies, you're getting those abilities popping like nobody's business right there. That's crazy. So it might be worth taking them in that formation. Then we got the Soul Bond of Vanguard, which allows you to take Dire Avengers, Incubi, and Witches. How about that? Good guys and bad guys all in one. While the unit from this formation is joined by the Vizark or Yvrain, add 1 to the weapon skill and ballistic skill of the models in that unit. Bonus does not increase Vizark or Yvrain. Vigor of Old, a unit in its formation within 7 of another. It has Fierce Charge special rule, which is obviously good for the Witches and the Incubi, because remember, they lose the power from pain, but they gain the Soul Burst. And now, they automatically, if they stay close, get Furious Charge. So that's kind of cool. You win some, you lose some, you kind of get some back there. I kind of dig it. First of the Reborn. Units from this formation can make a Soul Burst action if they're within 14 of a unit that is destroyed rather than 7. They can't come out of a Webway portal, but they sure as heck can perhaps move quick or, you know, just be able to do some stuff that it wouldn't normally do between the Avengers shooting an extra time or the Witches launching an assault that they wouldn't normally be able to launch, or even the Incubi for that matter. Eldari Blade Host is Witches, Storm Guardians, and Troops. So you've got Harlequins, Craftworld, and Dark Eldar all in one formation. Again, remember, they all become the Ynnari faction. At the start of the fight sub-phase, 2 units locked in combat with the same enemy unit, they gain Hatred. If you've got 3 at the top of the fight sub-phase, they also gain Preferred Enemy special rules. So Hatred and Preferred Enemy. That's pretty crazy. Like, you can do some serious work with that, and believe me, the Eldar need all sorts of help in close combat that they can get. United in Death, before choosing a unit from this formation to make a Soul Burst action, you can declare that the whole formation is United in Death. If you do so, that action you choose applies to all units in the formation. So if one gets it, they all can get it. Regardless if they're within 12 or 14 or whatever, they just all pop it off. This ability is used once per turn, and no unit from a formation has made a Soul Burst action already. So basically, you can't do it if you've already done a Soul Burst action, so you need to decide right then and there. It's kind of like issuing orders with Guard. You have to do it at the start of the phase. But something very cool to keep in mind. Unid's Net is really neat. It's a formation of a Warlock Conclave, which could be on bike, a unit of Wind Riders, Reavers, and Skyweavers, all put together, so it's basically jet bikes for days. Special rules are, whenever a unit's formation destroys an enemy unit or is destroyed, you get to put a dice on the side, and the Warlock Conclave generates an additional warp charge point for each die set aside this way. So it could help. The net is cast. All units in this formation must be set up in reserve. You can make one roll for them for each of your turns from the second. You can re-roll from there. When this formation arrives from reserve, each unit moves on the table as described for reserves, except this little thing about each unit must move on from a different table edge. Including your opponent's. Wait, did you just say I can bring on these jet bikes from my opponent's table edge? That seems pretty cool. Name how many other times in Warhammer 40k 7th edition you could come on from your opponent's board edge. It's very, very few. Very, very few. And apparently you can do it with this formation and their jet bikes. Wow. That's kind of crazy. That's one to look out for. That's a gotcha. That's a beehole pucker moment when you see something coming on from your board edge. You know what I mean? Whispering Ghost Hall is the final formation in here. Contains a Farseer, a Shadow Seer, a Spirit Seer, 2 Wraith Lords, and any 3 units chosen from either Wraith Guard or Wraith Blades. You get special rules. They get Fear. And non-character models in this formation can reroll the hit rolls of 1 that target enemy units within 12 of the character of this formation. So it's basically them kind of guarding or guiding, I guess, rather, the undead stuff, kind of like the whole Spirit Seer kind of feel. And enemy units locked in combat with any unit's formation are -2 to the leadership when taking fear tests. So always remember your fear test. Remember, demons generate it, a lot of other stuff generate it, monster creatures, gargantuan creatures, and then apparently all of these undead, kind of creepy looking automatons. So that's it. We're back to where we started. That has been our fantastic tips and tactics review for the new Gathering Storm part 2 of the series. It's Fracturing of Biel-Tan. It seems pretty cool. Don't know how it's going to shake out in the long run, but it's new. It's different. It's advancing the storyline. It's getting those hobby juices going, and I love it. So it can't be a bad thing for the hobby, but it's, you know, yet another release in a series of many releases. So, it might add some complexity. It might not. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Of course, if there's any errors, omissions, clarifications, you know, drop them in the comments field below too, and we'll try to get to all of those comments here this week. Thanks for watching, y'all.
Deleted scenes, bonus content, and all the interviews and post-game wrap-up videos can be located in the Hall of Veterans on thelongwar.net. Visit thelongwar.net today and try a week completely free with no strings attached. That's not all. TheLongWar.net is also your hobby resource for exclusive early access with an ad-free experience to all your favorite videos. Members of the Hall of Veterans gain early exclusive access to multiple hobby videos.